Welcome, welcome, and welcome. We are here. So, before we begin, prepare your ears to listen and your heart to receive as you take in the words that look to change lives, renew hearts, and open minds. Welcome to this edition of The Door to Expansion, where I am your host, Anthony Hubbard, the founder and speaker of Speak to My Heart Life Coaching. And for all the people who don't know what a life coach is, it's a person who partners up with clients and asks people thought-provoking questions to create a process that will inspire them to maximize their personal and professional potential. And I have with me my co-host, Miss Stephanie Holland Passmore. I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, hey there, Stephanie Hollins Passmore. I am a marriage and family therapist. I work with both individuals and the family system and other relationship dynamics. I help clients to develop strategies and skills to change their behavior and to cope with difficult situations. So basically, what I do in this profession is understand people in context or by their context, how they present to the world, and to how that presentation gives impact or influence and vice versa. So that's what I do as a profession. So let's
Dang,
get into the show.
technical.
you know, it's just what I do. Okay.
Hey, I feel you. Hey, so for the first time viewers out there, welcome, and for the returning ones, hey, thanks for joining us again. Me and Stephanie, we taking on this hard topic called relationships, and we're gonna hit it from a different few ways, various ways. I know a lot of people probably tune in and start talking about relationship as a means to like marriage, marriage or dating and stuff like that, and of course. You just heard some of her credentials, so she'll be a good person that when we start talking about that. We're also gonna hit it on from the work level because we all have relationships within in the workplace. Might even dive into a couple of issues whenever we start talking about like the role of children and parents. So like I said, we're gonna hit it in a few different ways over the next few weeks, and I even have a couple of special guests that'll be coming on, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on within the show. But first, let's go ahead and define what relationships is whenever we're kicking this thing off. Because if we don't understand what a relationship is, how are we even going to talk about it? So the definition of relationships is just a way of which two or more people or groups regard and behave with each other. And the four type of relationships that there are family, friendships, acquaintanceships, and even romantic relationships. With, like I said, like that's what we're used to. And so let's just begin with this. Why are relationships so important? And I'm me and Stephen, we gonna have like a little normal dialogue conversation, but at the same time, we want y'all to be engaged in this conversation as well, because we want to hear what's on y'all mind as well. So Stephen, in your mind, why are relationships so important?
Why are relationships important? I think relationships are reflections of who we are, right? How we relate to one another. Relationships can be support systems for us. Relationships can just be different perspectives. That's a different lens into the world, right? How we see things, how we receive things. So relationships are set up for us to function.
So, whenever we start talking about relationships, sometimes I think, all right, I guess a good question would be, and I'm gonna ask the same question too. Upon meeting a new person, what goes through your mind whenever you meet that new person? And whenever we start thinking about relationships, I mean, is it the way they look? Is it maybe the way they dress, how they act? I mean, what is it that really does it for you whenever you coming into a relationship? And then, like I said, this is not, just based a bias as far as like a marriage or a dating type thing. This is just overall in general.
Mm-hmm. I think that all depends on, what level, stage of life we're in. You know, how does that person, I don't want to be selfish and say, how does that person benefit me by being in a relationship with this person, whether that's friendship, marriage, just any type of partnership. So I guess it all depends on what stage of life we're in and like what we want that dynamic to look like. So, you know, say in a partner, you're wanting to build with someone, you know, does this person have some of the components of a relationship? Like, am I able to respect this person? Am I able to trust? Am I able to, you know, just create this for myself with this person?
And
In a professional sense, yeah.
no, go ahead. On a professional
And I was
sense.
just gonna say, like, in a professional dynamic, you know, is this someone that, you know, has knowledge and skill and talent? You know, will they benefit, you know, me in a team or a collaborative work effort? So it all just depends on what you want that dynamic to look like in the relationship.
Gotcha. And and for me, I think whenever I'm meeting new people, well, as I done got older in life, I think I'm taking some traits from my father and became like a real person who liked to talk a lot and sometimes too much. So I really don't even take on a whole bunch of reasons why I go and meet people. I was going to this one church and their motto was, it's not a stranger, it's just a friend you never met yet. And sometimes I take that up on board as thinking that as well. But so for some of the people out there, I would challenge people to say, instead of, you know, you made mention of it, instead of saying, what can this person do for me? Are you being selfish or anything like that? We should ask the question, how can we grow together with this person? So, and that's in business, that's in personal relationships, because if we looking to grow together, we're not trying to stand still and we benefit from each other. And, you know, in my line of work, we always talk about networking. So building together, when we start talking about the relationship, we building something together. Vice, instead of the crab mentality more than anything. Let me see what I can get from this person. And of course, we start going down a whole different road with negative relationships. We do have
Yeah.
a comment on here. So when we asked about it said important for stress, longer life, or better sense of or purpose. So that would be a good reason for a relationship. And then she also followed it back up with, especially when it's positive. So I mean, I think that's, you know, in relationships, that's what it's all about. You want to find somebody, you know, like she mentioned, in a positive way. So, oh, Miss,
Well, Marinthony, can we back up a little bit?
yeah, go
Because
ahead.
when you had labeled off the different types of relationships, you had stated, you know, like we have our family, our friendships, our acquaintanceships, our romantic relationships, but we didn't mention a relationship to self.
Okay then.
You know, what I meant by that, like, before we can like relate to someone else or make requests of someone else or have expectations of someone else, we really need to like really do some inner work within ourselves, you know? So I think the most important relationship first is relationship to self. And if you're a person of faith, relationship to God. Like, we have to have something foundational to kind of like tether us to someone else in a relationship. Not to say that we have to be solid within ourselves, but we got to know something about ourselves. You know, we have to have this working knowledge of ourselves, who we are as individuals, uh, expectations for ourselves, self-worth, self-love. So some of those components need to be in place before we start relating to others, you know.
And, you know,
Hope I'm making sense.
You do, and I'm not going to try to steal my guest thunder whenever when he come back on here talking about the dating and relationship as it relates to having a dating contract. But at the same time, whenever you say, Bill, you got to know yourself and you got to know who you are. How can I expect somebody to treat me a certain way if I don't know how I need to be treated? So, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. And whenever we start talking about building a relationship, I mean, that's a perfect example right there. It's just like building a house. How do I know what type of structure to put on something if I don't know what the foundation of it is? So I think that's pretty good. And like you said, it's one of the things I didn't mention.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, it's just like you talking about building a house. Like you have to understand what foundation to start with, but you also, have to understand the conditions. The weather conditions, the climate. So it's a lot that plays into that, right? So you come in with an understanding of what you need to build for a foundation, and also an understanding of what's going on around you, right? So it's just relational, and that's what relationships are. How am I perceived? How does the outside, the external, receive me? That's basically it.
And you see what Miss Pouchet put on there. I had to get her name right this time.
Okay.
My answer varies based on the type of relationship. I look to see if I can value to them or their life. If I personally cannot see a fit, then I already know it would be a problem. And yet again, that's whenever we go back to knowing ourselves. So, I mean, that's just right there the follow up to what you were saying. Once you know yourself and who you are, then now you can extend something to somebody, or like we said, it's not I'm trying to use this person for gain or anything like that, but how can we grow together? So, Well, now here's the tough question: why do people? How would we phrase this? So I was listening to something today, and it was talking about question. I mean, whenever we look at the reason why relationships fail, and we would have, and this is in all types of relationships, the whole reason why relationships fail is due to unforgiveness. And I thought about that for a minute, and I was like, okay, then if you were in a marital situation, something had to happen for one person not to forgive the other, and then it's a separation. Friendships, same thing. A person did something to somebody and they can't forgive them, and whenever they couldn't forgive them, then everything broke apart. So I just thought about that for a second. I was like, that's pretty neat to sit and think about that one thing. But if we forgave that person, don't you think that we'll be able to have another relationship with that person if we forgave them?
Well, I'm going to say that forgiveness, I think the inability to forgive is not the reason why people, like, let me see, should I say this? I think relationships don't end because of unforgiveness. I think the forgiveness can be easy. Why relationships end is because there's no follow through to reconciliation. We can forgive individuals. It's just that we don't know how to reconcile the relationship. Like, how do we actually move forward? So they don't put in that work or that follow through. They can forgive and say, yeah, I forgive this person. They did this. But I think the issue is like, how can I now relate to this person?
So Melanie, she put on there, it was a lack of communication. And so I guess my follow-up to that one right there would be, just to your point, is I can bury the hatchet, but guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna leave a handle that's out there. So just in case you do something to me again, I can pull the hatchet back up, and then we can talk about it again. So, and you start thinking about whenever we do you know a person that is, I guess I wouldn't say an unforgiving person, but in a way I will say an unforgiving person. Somebody, you see somebody, what type of attitude do you think that they have?
What type of attitude with
Yeah, because
unforgiveness?
most of the time you see like somebody that's a very bitter person that goes around, and if they have, here's a common thing, you at work, and you just meet this person, and this like they mad at 20 people in the office, and it's just like, wait a minute, why is it that you mad at all these people, or you can't get along with these people, and you have something against all of them, but then it's a common denominator, and they would never go back and say, oh, it's me, I'm the problem. It's always somebody else's problem. So, that's why I say, that's where I see the bitterness at. And then one relationship, I'm not going to say one relationship affects all relationships, but at the same time, whenever we start looking at romantic relationships, somebody get hurt in a relationship, what happens to the next person in line? They have to sit there and deal with the same thing. So that's why whenever I say the bitterness portion of it, that's what I see.
Gotcha. Yeah, it goes back to me saying like we don't necessarily do the work to reconcile these relationships when things come to an end or to a close. We just don't do the work. And so when a person is carrying that burden around with them, that's what that looks like, that outwardly, like, sulking, as you said, this unforgiving spirit, but that just spirit of heaviness. So it's their inability to reconcile. So it's basically you're walking around unhealed or unwhole because of the relationship dynamics of not being able to forgive or the ability to reconcile.
And let's see, Ms. Boucher, she agreed with you. She think the inability to reconcile was talking about what comes into play on that one right there as well. So, and it's amazing how communication always come up in situations, and it's how is it that everybody knows that we need to communicate to do everything, but everybody, no matter if you're in a business world, if you're in a romance, no matter what it is, and communication is the key. So I really think, is it just people don't know how to communicate with each other?
I think so. There's like in therapy, I use the 4 C's to communication. It's confront, okay? Meaning like when one of you feels sour or frustrated or whatever the emotion is, you don't hold on to it. So you got to communicate your feelings, right? And that's sometimes meaning just to kind of squeeze the truth out of one another. Like, don't be, accusatory, any of that. Just, it is what it is. We got to talk about it, right? Then you got to comply. So that means that whoever is being confronted, they have to have a willingness to listen, okay, to kind of receive that rebuke without becoming angry or defensive. Then you confirm, right? The listener now paraphrases the problem back. So it's like, I hear what you're saying to me. I understand. There's some clarity. And then change occurs. So after like the feelings and the message has been delivered and received, then that's where the communication is happening. Like, I'm listening, I'm hearing you, I understand what needs to happen. So yeah, people just don't tend to like want to confront situations. They don't want to put in the work and kind of go through the process of what communication really looks like. People think it's just talking, and it's really listening and clarification.
And that listening portion is so it's so overlooked. Whenever we talk about communication, There's whenever you look at a phone, it's a piece where you put your mouth and you talk, and it's a piece
Mhm.
where you put your ear to listen. And like you said, some people it's all about the talking portion of it. But then you also
Mhm.
have the other person who holds everything in, and that's their way of communicating. It's like a shutdown mode. And then whenever they do communicate, the communication is going to really start whenever they explode. And then the other person is like, "Whoa, where did all this come from?" So
Mhm.
here we got a comment from Miss Boucher. She said that inner struggle takes over because what you don't deal with will deal with you. And I think it shows up in repeated drama because their vision is blurred through unresolved pain. Yep, and it's same thing. You hold on to it so much that that's what happens. And Miss Wilson said,
Mhm.
both people are not able to compromise on things. And she also mentioned that having those difficult conversations, they are hard, and especially whenever you deal with those relationships. And let's talk about office relationships, and as it
Mhm.
relates to uh, communication, because a lot of people, whenever you're in an office setting, you have to see these people 8 plus hours a day. And so whenever you go in there and you're talking to these people, and everything is not kosher, and a lot of people go in there and be like, you know what? I'm only gonna have a professional conversation with her. I don't want to. My personal life is my personal life, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. Uh, of course, being in the military, everything crosses. Everything is gonna cross. Personal and professional is gonna cross. On the Since I've been out though, I've realized a lot of people. That's what it is. It's a personal thing. We're gonna leave it at the house. If it's professional, we'll work on it at home. But to me, I guess it's like I said, my nature of me talking to everybody, it seemed kind of distant sometimes, you know. And I get it. We there to do a job, but at the same time, I'm the person I like to have fun. So how can I have fun whenever the only thing we figure and talk about is this, and we're gonna stay by the book?
Mhm.
To me, whenever we start talking about them relationships or acquaintanceships, it's out of the window to me.
Mhm. Well, you have to find that balance. There's what's the saying? There's a time and a place for everything, and the way we communicate and relate to one another. Um, that's why a lot of people don't like constructive criticism. You know what I'm saying? You know, because the intent is with constructive criticism is that cool. You cannot be crushing. You cannot negate assumption. You can negate assumptions, and there needs to be connection, meaning an endpoint. Like there has to be some introspection. So uh, there's four fruits to communication. You have to be curious. You have to be careful, and you have to ask, and you have to connect. So with the intent to really get involved and engage with someone in communication, that should be like the end goal. You know, that's effective communication with the willingness just to hear someone out and to provide feedback.
So you mentioned that constructive criticism, and the old saying of "sticks and stone might hurt my bones, but words never hurt." Yeah, as we didn't got older, now it's probably something we used to tell our kids. Just like that little boo boo, scratch it off and then push them on. But that ain't the case. I mean, because if that was the case, then we probably wouldn't see as much violence. We wouldn't see as many people getting hurt out there on social media. We wouldn't have the bullies out there. So, yeah, that statement is long gone from here. Here we got another
Mhm.
comment from Ms. Pouchet. She says they don't know how to communicate with themselves first, which could be why pain on replay ends up overshadows the ability to see other people or situations for what they are outside of their past, which is true. And we'll deal with that past thing as well. And then she also mentioned that compartmentalized theory on how to deal with emotions can be dangerous because if some things aren't dealt with, then the bleeder can feel toxic. And whenever we start talking about that past issue, sometimes we got to check the people we with. Uh, and what I mean by that is a lot of we bring people with us on our journeys and they don't need to be there. And whenever we start talking about those toxic relationships, that's one of them things. How many times have somebody that went back to somewhere and everything has a season? So once you enter that a new season, why go back to the old season? And I think sometimes we get comfortable with that person or those people that we continue to go back to them.
Oh yeah.
Hey,
Have you heard this? Have you heard that saying, you can't heal in the place where you got wounded? You know, and when you talk about those types of relationships, those codependencies, those soul ties, that's real. Those some rough situations to be in. I mean, there are women and men, you know, been married for years and still tethered to somebody else outside of that relationship.
true.
You know, you know,
And,
I tell people, like, the only thing that's going to sever a soul tie is God, because that's how strong them soul ties are. You know, yeah.
let's see. So Miss Boucher, she said exactly, and then also Miss Wilson, she mentioned it's about the comfort zones, and the comfort zones is what I think a lot of people get so entangled with. That use that entangled word. They get so entangled with that. I know this person, so I can go back to them. But then you sit and think, if you know that person so well, then why are you going back to that person if they the one that hurt you? And it's because the familiarity. You know, that's what it is. At the end of the day, I already know what I have on this side right here, so why should I go to something different? And anybody else on the outside looking in, sit there and see something like that and be like, man, you crazy. Well, I wouldn't do that. Well, of course you wouldn't do it because you was never in that situation. You know, and I think sometimes whenever we lend our recommendations and advice to people, I think we also need to look back and be like, you've never been in this situation. You're not built for their situation that they're in. So it's kind of hard to say what you wouldn't or wouldn't do in a situation because you were never in that position. And sometimes I think we all kind of forget that whenever we giving that information out. And so for me, from a life coach perspective, that's why I always ask, what are your goals? What are you trying to do? And let's get you to that point instead of me going in there saying, this is what you need to do. Because, of course, you ain't going to follow my guidelines because it's not what you would do.
And coming from a therapist point of view, when I have clients that are involved in those toxic relationships or dynamics, I always ask the question of, like, how can I get you unfamiliar with that dysfunction? You know, we need to go back and untether you from that dysfunction. So, and it's just an awareness, because a lot of times individuals don't understand what's healthy versus what's unhealthy. So just getting an awareness of what's considered unhealthy, and it's like, okay, new perspective. Then they make the transition outside of those familiar and comfortable zones of life.
And that's pretty good to even know, you know, because, and we're going to go to the trauma side of this. But before we go to the trauma side of it, let me put this comment up right here. She said, people show up in our lives based on who they think they are, respected. We always have the power to decide who we will allow in our lives and be prepared to pivot when needed and be honest with self, which, I mean, great point there, Ms. Boucher. We have the power. Oh, did you see it? We do have that power. And like you said, we should respect not only the person, but ourselves to know that, yes, this is not working and we need to move on. And then Ms. Wilson, she had put right on there. And then also Ms. Boucher also came back and said, be honest in self-conversation first. It's not that we know them. We think we know them because we hold them in a light that maybe they should no longer be because people evolve or change, which is, you know, a great segue, because no matter what we're doing, that's exactly what's going to happen. if I'm presenting you one version of myself, what usually happens at the end? A whole nother version pop up, and it's just like, where did this person come from?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, because we all perform.
yes,
We've all been there. We perform, you know. We try to bring the best of ourselves, whether that's very unauthentic. But yeah, it's a big performance. Do you get an Academy Award for that or Emmy? Which award do you get for good acting?
what it all depend. It all depend on how far and what type of relationship it was in. Because either you're gonna get a marriage certificate, followed by a death certificate, or a divorce decree. So it all depends. If it's a relationship, I mean, if it's like for a job, you might not have a job no more. So it all depends.
Hmm. Yeah.
So whatever type of award that you're looking for. So that's why like she had mentioned, be honest. That's the key. I'd rather give you the best version of myself up front and let you know. Hold on, let me take that back. I'm gonna give you my version of myself. I'm not gonna say my best version, because if I give you my best version, that's me showing something. So I will give you the version that this is who I am, and being honest with that person. And what's so hard about letting people know who you are up front? Let them accept you for who you're gonna be. Uh, I might not be the cup of tea for everybody. You might not be a cup of tea for everybody, but oh well. We live and we learn, right?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Before we even entangle ourselves in relationship dynamics, we have to have some sense of who we are, you know? Because honestly, a lot of us aren't honest with our damn selves. So how can we expect something out of someone that we haven't even set standards for ourselves? We're not kind of foundational in our belief system. Like, we can be swayed easily. So we have to kind of be, not kind of be, but attempt to be solid with ourselves.
So why do you think that we not solid with ourselves?
You know, a lot of us are, it's hard for us to look in the mirror. It's, whether that's inherited trauma, whether it's the negative self-talk that we kind of indulge in, um, perspective. Uh, it goes back, I talk a lot about imposter syndrome. Um, just not having a clear sense of who we are as a person, how we define ourselves.
And I brought up the trauma portion of it earlier, and I think some people uh, have that relationship issue because of what they have seen in the past. Some of them have that same issue because of what they've endured themselves, and now all that turns back, and people not being able to, what's a good way to say it? Whenever people have issues like that, I think that it stems from, like you said, not knowing themselves. And one of the reasons why they don't know themselves is because they've always been with somebody. They need that codependency that you was talking about. And whenever people basically separate themselves and then just sit down and say, this is who I am. And, like Ms. Boucher said, this is what I can offer to somebody else. But if you don't really know what you have to offer, how can you enter a relationship? I'm just gonna throw my whole self in there. Well, not everybody needs your whole self. Everybody needs, sometimes they need bits and pieces of something to make themselves whole. And somebody, and here I'm gonna give you a couple comments there. Miss Wilson, she said lack of social skills, that could be one of it. And then she basically says all of that whenever I was talking about some of the reasons. And then Ms. Gonzalez put on there, people are afraid to bring their whole self because they're afraid to be vulnerable with someone. And that vulnerability is exactly what it is. And it's because I've been hurt in the past before. So why do I want to go and experience this yet again? And
Mhm.
then Miss Wise, she put on there, fear of rejection can be a motivator for not being authentic in many relationships. And isn't that amazing? That's a hard one right there. A fear of rejection. You know, I I used to tell everybody, I hate when people tell me no. And in certain instances, it's a good thing when they tell you no, because it makes you strive and do something better. So in like I said, in certain instances. Now, in other instances, when you're telling me no, yeah, I'm gonna feel it. When I was applying for jobs, after I got out, I had like 6, 7 people reject me for getting a job. Did I feel bad? Yeah, I felt bad. But guess what it did? It motivated me to go a little bit farther and do something else. But whenever we start talking about relationships, if somebody reject me, it's just like, dang, well, why did you reject me? But in the same instance, I rather, whenever we was talking about the constructive criticism, I rather for you to tell me why you're rejecting me, so maybe I can become a better person in myself. And of course, we all human. We all have our personal things. So you might reject me because of whatever, but another person might like me just because of that. So it all, to me, it's kind of tricky more than anything. And Miss Wilson, she said, right, the right rejection can be protection, and I do agree with that too. Uh, there's a lot of people that have rejected me, and I was like, thank you, because now I see the reason why I was rejected.
Mhm.
I wasn't in the right season. I wasn't in the right place at the right time. So I thank you for doing it.
What is it? Is it what's how does the saying go? Like a no, it does not necessarily mean a denial. It could just be a delay. Do you know what I mean by that? So yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, you have to be, if you're not in that right season to accept something, no matter whatever it is. And I'll put my daughter. She came and she told me, she was like, "Dad, I'm not ready to go to school yet." And that was like 3 or 4 years ago. But now, she's like, I'm ready to go to school. And I said, you know what? Thank you for not wasting your time. Thank you for not wasting my money, because that's exactly what you did. But now you have a better understanding, and relationships are the same way. Yes, you could have meshed with a person 100% 5 years ago. And now if you go and talk to the person, you probably couldn't stand that person because whatever life then showed you about that person. So, hey, it's out there. It's real.
Mhm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So, what's some other aspects of relationships you think we should hit on? And and uh,
Mhm.
and if the audience members out there, what other aspects of relationships do you think that can be discussed right now? And like I said, I'm trying not to get too hard and heavy into one certain type of area, because, like I said, I got a few guest people that's supposed to be coming on, and they gonna hit on relationship as far as dating, uh, having some other relationships on the reason why people understanding how another couple or how other people feel or think. Because I think whenever we talk about relationships, we always think of some uh, that straight, and whenever I mean straight, just this person and this person. That's it. I mean, there's other relationships that's out there that if you don't agree with, okay, oh well, you're not that person that's being affected by it. So there's no reason for us to downplay or put somebody else down because of something that we might think or we might feel is not the right thing to do. Uh, it's amazing how, and I hate to bring the Bible up in this, but it's amazing how a lot of people, religious people, be like, well, you got to love your neighbor. But then you sit over here bashing somebody at the same time because of what they feel or how they perceive things. Is that our place? I wouldn't think so. So and that's why I kind of want to bring up some of these topics up on the show to show people, look, these people are human. They just like you are, just because they might
Mhm.
have a different way of thinking. And that's another thing with relationships. I think that I was going to start writing, I was doing some research to do some more writing on my blog site, and it's called the herd mentality. A lot of people go into a relationship with the expectation of them staying together. And with that herd mentality, meaning, we'll just put it out there for political reasons. If I'm a Republican, I'm going to stay with a Republican. If I'm a Democrat, I'm going to stay with a Democrat. But why? Whenever we start thinking about relationships, sometimes you need to step out that comfort zone that we was talking about earlier and put other people in our lives. Because if we surround the same people, if we continue to surround the same people, then what are we really doing? We're going to keep that same mentality, and us having that same mentality, it ain't going to do nothing but hurt us more than anything. So Ms. Pouchet, she had put on there, the importance of boundaries is always important to discuss. Okay, then, importance of boundaries. So I guess the first question would be, when we talk about boundaries, I think, and yet again, I don't want to step on this guy's position, but how do you have that conversation? Is that one of the first things you bring up, is the boundary setting? So I would say, how does one bring up a boundary setting? You there, Stephanie? I think she has some technical difficulties over there. But whenever I start thinking about boundaries, I think we go back to that communication piece and that aspect of it, of basically saying, look, this is what it's going to be. And also, whenever you set those boundaries, letting the person know, once you set the boundaries with that person, you have to follow up with it and say, this is what the boundaries that I'm setting for us. This is the walking away point. And understanding that and letting that person know that this is the walk away point, that will allow them to know that, hey, that's it. Miss Wise, she put in here, I like Breen Brown. She says vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's that unstable feeling we get when we step out of our comfort zone or losing control. It's that unstable feeling we get. Yes. And sometimes that unstable feeling is a horrible thing. And I think sometimes whenever we have that unstable feeling, that's what kind of make us lose it more than anything. Not being in control, and not being in control. Ooh, that can be that's a scary thing there. So I guess to the audience, I would like to ask a couple questions. Let's see, Miss Stephanie, she just came back in. I see you having some true technical difficulties over there, huh?
Difficulties, yes. So what were we talking about?
Yeah, so Miss, we was talking about the different topics, and the one topic that came up was about boundaries. And then Miss Anwar, she says vulnerability is an uncertain risk and emotional exposure. It's that unstable feeling we get when we step out of our comfort zone, are losing control. And then she also followed back up with boundaries are healthy and help define how we're going to operate or what we can accept. And yet again, we go back to those work relationships when we start talking about boundaries. You setting foot in the workplace and you having that difficult conversation with that person and say, this is what I will accept from you and this is what I want. And of course, we always talk about being professional during those time periods. And yes, we will not cross the line on any personal information that's being shared. All right, fine. And I think also whenever we look at a child and parent relationship, how many times do we actually sit down and set boundaries for our kids?
Only when instances come up. I don't think we necessarily initially set boundaries with our kids. It's only when instances come up. It's kind of like this role play, like, and I don't want to say especially in Black families, but people of color, like in our families, we don't have courageous conversations. We don't have those conversations beforehand, like as a preventative measure. It was just like, when things come up, then we're going to talk about it. And it's just like, there was no established boundaries. There was no, talks about, consequences, our actions, and then consequences. We don't have those conversations until something has happened.
And whenever we start talking about families and trauma and all this other stuff, you would think if we did have conversations like that, how easy would our relationships be if we did have conversations like that? Because then we would know how to conversate with people. We would understand what we will accept. But yet again, it goes back to self. If I don't know what I will take on or what I will accept from somebody else, how can I actually express that to somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
We got a comment from Mr. Burleson. He put in there reactionary boundaries, and that's exactly what it is. Those reactionary boundaries, because that, you know what, we'll put in, for instance, we have a little kid that's out here cussing up a storm, right? And then you see this kid at 3-4 years old. We'll set a boundary. Don't you do this, or you don't supposed to talk like that around me. But then as these kids, as your child get older, they get 15, 16, and then they cussing around you. Did the boundary stop, or did you give them permission to do it? I mean, what was it that severed that boundary? And it's just one of them things, because it's just like in our relationships now. You set a boundary, but I guess in the military they call that stick to itness. Do you stick to that same boundary, or at what point in time do you have another conversation to break that boundary?
Yeah, we oftentimes set boundaries, and then we get upset when we cross those boundaries. It's not the other person. We cross those boundaries. It's not the other person. It's what we've allowed and what we've made exemptions for, or excuses for. Like, we set a boundary, and then we choose to cross those boundaries. Not allow someone to cross boundaries. We cross boundaries. Those boundaries we have set. And then we get mad because we don't want to hurt.
Yeah. And that's something. And so it goes back to it's 20 people that's in here that's all mad that I'm mad at. And although I'm mad at them, it's their fault. Whenever you need to point the finger back to yourself, it's like, well, this is what I allowed myself to do. That's just like whenever we sit and tell our kids, we sit and complain about our kids. Well, you know what? You the one raised that kid. So why are you really mad at them? Yes, they make their decisions, but certain things you allow to happen. And so why are you so mad at them whenever you need to be mad at yourself? And I mean, I go through that same thing all the time, because I'm just like, well, dang, I allowed that to happen for a certain amount of time. Miss Wilson, she put on there, yes, it's what we tolerate. And so, yet again, yes, if that's what we tolerate and we put up with it, what's the purpose of being mad? Who can we be mad at?
Yeah.
So, yes, being mad at yourself. But yet again, you got to know yourself to know something, though.
Exactly.
Let's see, what else? So we didn't have any more comments in there. So
yeah, I think addressing that the mother-daughter relationship would be a very good topic to cover.
Well, I can't have a mother-daughter relationship topic with you.
What'd you say?
I said I can't have a mother and daughter relationship conversation with you.
Well, I mean, you've seen it play out, right? You have daughters.
Yeah, I done seen it play out before, and yeah, it's one of them things, I guess. But I guess it's just type whatever type of relationship, even the father son relationship as well, and sometimes the lack
Well, it's
of.
just like passing down, like I'm talking about when the relationships are toxic. A lot of times I have daughters, grown daughters sitting in front of me and like, I can't stand my mom. This is what we went through, da 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 da. And it's like, do you understand your mom's narrative? Do you know what her upbringing was like? Her family of origin issues were like. Do you not understand that's a passing down of whatever mom has gone through? She's passed that down. So, that can have some resolve in those mother daughter relationships, those toxic relationships, when daughters understand their mom's narratives.
So yet again, is walking in somebody else's shoes and not under it's talking about somebody else and not understanding what they went through and the reason why they're there and in the position that they're
Yeah.
in at that certain amount of time. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
quite sure we all can agree that we've all been there. We've all said something and be like, okay, then, but then you go back and be like, oh snap, I didn't know. And whenever you didn't know,
Mm-hmm.
then you'd be like, oh, now I see how that's the reason why you reacted that way. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's a tough
Yeah.
situation. And I tell you, it's very tough.
Yeah. Because it had to come from somewhere. It just didn't start there with that person. It had to come from somewhere.
So, and this be our last thing because our time's we probably about 8 9 minutes out. But whenever we talk about like something like that, what about us with the continual blame game? My relationship is the way it is because of this right here. And, like how you mentioned, a mother, daughter, or maybe even a father and daughter relationship. A lot of people blame and say, well, my dad wasn't there, so I don't know how a man's supposed to treat me. Or
Mm-hmm.
my mom or my dad or whatever. That it's one of them things. So whenever I'm quite sure you had people, your clients come in and say something like that. It's like, well, this is how I know. This is how I know to be treated.
Mm-hmm. And that's where, I come in and kind of give some guidance as, a way to better reflect on like, hey, am I lost there?
No, you good.
Yeah, just helping clients kind of, becoming familiar with um, that type of behavior that was modeled for them, recognizing what's healthy, what's unhealthy, um, and kind of like helping them to unlearn those behaviors, those patterns. Um, so once we know better, we do better, right? It's
So
simple.
that's the hope. That's the hope of
The
all
hope.
counseling and coaching theories. So Miss Wise, she put on there open communication, transparency, wild, crazy acceptance of who she is, daughter is, are all part of a good foundation. We all have to be, but we all have to be healthy, and we all have to take responsibility for our own lives, life experiences, even if we were handed something crappy from the past. And that's a true statement. And sometimes I think a lot of people don't get that. We continue to harbor so many things, and we take it into new relationships, and that's what really hurts us more than anything. Taking that old stuff, taking the old baggage, learn how to cut it loose. I made mention on one show that I was reading in a book. It said about an airplane. An airplane cannot fly. An airplane cannot fly. That's why they ask you to only bring so much luggage on there. Because if you weigh it down, it will not go anywhere. Same thing whenever you go into a new relationship. How can you ever get the relationship to take off if you bring so much baggage with you? So learn how to deal with it, cut it loose, and move on. And yet again, now whenever we start talking about those toxic relationships, sometimes if they're toxic, it might not be good for us. So maybe we need to leave them alone.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier said than done. I can tell you that. Though.
I'm about to say that's a lot easier said than done.
I mean, let's look at people's relationship with smoking. How many people just can say, "I'm done with smoking"? I mean, yes, we start talking about addictions and all that other stuff, but at the same time, these relationships are addiction if you look at it.
Very much so. Very much so.
So,
very much so.
Well, all right then, Miss Devin, that's about our time right there. But yet again, I think this is like I tell everybody, like I was saying at first, this is our kickoff show about relationships. We want to kind of introduce the relationship aspect and bring it all, so we can all start bringing it all together over the different versions of relationships. But we just wanted to have an opening show just to say, hey, so I really want to thank everybody who had comments and who made statements in there. Thanks for the interaction. I mean, this is what it's all here for. Like the webcast say, we're trying to illuminate hearts and open up minds. As long as your ears can hear it, and hopefully your heart will receive it. That's what it's all about. So with that being said, Stephanie, you got anything you want to get of viewers?
The whole is greater than, the greater sum of the parts. So it's just in relationships, it's just how we kind of focus in on ourselves and understand the impact and influence we have on others and how we take it all in and receive that perspective from the world. So I'm hoping that, as we cover relationship dynamics, we'll see how we are influenced and impacted in different relationships. So I'm looking forward to our conversations and these courageous conversations, because it will get deep and heavy. All right.
It will, and I think that's the joy and the beauty of coaching and counseling. So whenever you start diving into these things and you do get deep, you have to understand that you're not alone in the situations. That's why we have professionals out here to allow you to, I'm not going to say download your issues or your problems, but to recognize what they are and to find out what type of gains or what do you need to do to make yourself better. And so the whole purpose of counseling and coaching is just that. We're not here to jump in your business or anything like that. We're here to assist and to help because who else do you have to turn to? And I know a lot of people, and I'm quite sure you probably get the same thing. Well, I can't afford it. I sit and think about, well, if you can't afford it, what can you afford? Can you afford to continue living the same life that you're living, going down the wrong pathway? Or somebody be like, oh, well, I have friends or I have somebody else that'll help me out. And then yet again, I'll follow up with, well, how's that going out? How's that going for you right now? Look at the situation you're in. You have those people to reach out to. And we at this point. So self-care, look out for yourself. Realize who you are as a person. And how can somebody else help you? Let somebody help you help yourself. So with that being said, I will leave you with this right here. And also, if you have any topics that you would like to discuss or want to hear be discussed, please go to Speak to My Heart. Speak to My Heart, lifecoach@gmail.com, and just drop an email to me, or you can go to Facebook. I'm on there. Or if you haven't been to my website, Speak to My Heart, lifecoach.com. If you haven't been there yet, please go over there. I will start back putting my own blogs back up there. So it's just a little insight on different type of different topics that I put on there. It's been probably about a month or two. I've been productive. I ain't gonna say I've been busy. I have been productive because I don't want to provide any information to anybody else that I wouldn't want. So I do my research, and that's what I've been doing, a lot of research. So it's time for me to go ahead and start putting that information back out there to help anybody that want to listen more than anything. Miss Stephanie, do you want to promote your, I ain't gonna say promote, but I'll give your website out. just so if anybody have any questions or any to contact you or anything.
It's hard. You're going in and out, so I don't
Oh,
know if the connection.
can you hear me now?
I can.
All right. Yeah, I said it. Do you want to put your information out there just in case anybody need to hit you up or have any questions for you?
Yeah, you can reach me at Stephanie@thenarrativeshift.com. That's my email. And if you are in the Washington State area, the Pacific Northwest, you can, and you know of someone who needs counseling or you just like to talk, I do offer consultations, and you can go to thenarrativeshift.com.
All right. So, y'all, with that being said, I will leave you with this. A great relationship is about two things. First, find out the similarities. Second, respect the differences. So this has been another edition of the Door to Expansion webcast. And guess what? And I'm so sorry, but we got to do it. But we out of here. Sure enough. I'll let y'all.
Bye.